Hello, and welcome back. Immediately get another game. It's somewhat interesting to commentate over. I'm playing Marksman, or as Sharpshooter, running Agitating Energies. That I'm running the 5% increased damage and stimulated, just like last time, except for I was playing for there, so I was playing Ultraviolet. I show my stats here in the beginning, so you guys, if you're curious, I run the same thing. For virulence sometimes, though, I usually decide to go more mastery. So I'll drop my crit down to like 3500, just the lowest I can get, and then I'll run a mastery stem and then get accuracy through my enhancements, if that makes sense. I can explain it better if you guys have any questions about pyro, though. Anyway, getting into this match, we basically are playing like MM versus MM, but also this MM player has a pocket healer, and I believe the Sork on my team is playing with one of these healers. I don't know which one. I assume Kitty, but I don't actually know. So I'm not gonna assume. He could be solo for all I know, but I doubt it. So it is a pre-made versus pre-made, DPS heal duo versus another DPS heal duo. I just happen to be one of the solo players that are queued into this. I had a match against Temps before this, and there was no healer on my team, and if there was, they weren't playing, so it was nice to actually get a game where we can actually play against each other. In this situation, I know that most of their damage is built up and ramped because it's MM and lightning, so I do decide to start playing a little bit more aggressive. We do have two healers, so if I can draw their attention, I'll be able to mitigate the damage probably better than the Madness Sork when I actually do have defensives, but when I don't have defensives, it's much better for them to be hitting the Sork. So typically I'm just thinking about how to mitigate damage, since I will be one of the targets and so will the other person, which is another thing I want to point out here. So all three of these Sorks are, like, their positioning, I mean, I kind of force them to pull up a little bit more, but it does make it to the point where, you know, we've got a little sniper over in a corner, pew 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 pew, with a big old AoE. To be fair, that's pretty much what Marksman does. It has like 5 damaging abilities, and one of them happens to be Suppressive Fire, and it happens to be massive. So you've got that situation where, yeah, a lot of damage will be coming from Suppressive Fire. In this situation, I'm just trying to get damage on this guy because technically hitting Marksman is not always the best target. I thought he didn't have Entrench there, and I also thought the other Sage was still on top of him, so I threw a grenade, but yeah, that's my bad, I wasn't paying attention. Roll his ambush here, or not ambush, but his diversion, my bad. And for the most part, like, there's not like anything too interesting going on in this match. It's just like a whole bunch of trying to screw each other over, but in reality we just don't have enough damage. We have too much build up time for most of our damage, and we have to sync our damage or pretty much hit the healer, but at any point the healers can go line of sight, and it makes it even worse. But also at the same time, you know, Sniper has pretty decent mobility nowadays, so it's a weird situation. So at its core, it's really just trying to fight and pressure as much as we can. Had they had their other healer actually contributing a little bit more, that would have been great for them, but in general, I think if that happened, it would just be easier for us to use the rest of our team as a front line, because we technically don't have a front line, and they don't either, but I can almost promise you that we wouldn't really have any issue. There is a concealment offer that tries to come and kill me later. Doesn't really matter. Normally concealment offers are a lot more annoying, but this person just was not having a good time because all the sages were actually, you know, peeling, like playing the class the way they should. So it ended up being a lot more enjoyable. There's another instance, you just roll ambush. It just happens. I am trying to like bait my ambush every now and then, but sometimes I just don't care. Like, I just want to hit something at this point. This is part of the reason why I don't play range in general, especially like casters, because I get really antsy and I just don't have the patience for all this, oh, I'm gonna run around and hide in the corner kind of gameplay. Because the moment that you play a melee, like, none of those strategies like work, like, at all. They just straight up just don't work. That melee will follow you and he will kill you. It's just the way it is in an arena. 9 times out of 10 it doesn't work. The only reason it ever works in Arena is if you're playing 4 DPS, and even then, typically competent players won't let you get away with it. I'm not a fan of the stall line running playstyle, and which is why I make it very easy and open to hit me for the most part, because I know I have 2 healers, and I'm going to happily take the damage, and I'm going to try to roll larger amount of damage. This also means that it's a little bit easier for my healers to basically do what they want to, but in this situation we're about to have more of their team come, which definitely puts everybody in a bad spot, but I do try to reposition here. Unfortunately, the healers weren't as quick as like kind of realizing that. They would have been in better shape if they did, but that's okay. They're probably just looking at healer frames like the whole time, or not healer frames, but crew frames. But generally, I always keep my scoreboard in the top right. Sometimes I forget to look at it, but in this map, it's actually good to keep track of the timer, so you know when you need to go in. A lot of people will save their CCs or things to try to get you killed by the insta-kill mechanic. On melee, I don't really care. I like to push it to pretty much the limits, because most melee have a leap that can gap close. But as a ranged DPS, you want to be more mindful about it. Here I use some suppressive fires. I intended not to use suppressive fire for most of the match, just to kind of prove a point, but I couldn't help myself. That was like a perfect situation to use it. The only times I really use it outside of that is to basically, what's the word for it? Basically try to bait the AoE to see if he's got the reaction speed to roll it, or maybe he'll like roll it late, thinking it was diversion and it wasn't. But that didn't end up working. I think it's just because his MS is too high. But that's to be predicted, to be honest. Shouldn't have even bothered. And then here we start getting like the issue with the concealment operative. So if you guys are curious, like I can let the last bit of my penetrating rounds actually knock him back. But I wanted to knock him back because of the root that's applied to it, because I didn't want him rolling. So I could basically get that damage off on them. And then I used suppressive fire there. The only reason I used suppressive fire there was to force him to reposition, so they're not able to just free cast on the healer. Him repositioning instead of casting something on the healer actually helps a lot there. And in this situation, he just insta hollows that. That's totally fine. My point was just to make it harder for him to do anything for a little bit. And this also puts me in a better position because he's got to push back, the healer's got to push back. This also means if I want to push up, I can, because Kitty did move up. I'm not sure why. So in this situation, I can handle most of this, but I need to start dealing with this guy as soon as possible. So now I've swapped to him. And at this point, he like tries to fight back, but this is the 3rd time he's been knocked. He's not having a good time, and now he's going to get creeping terror rooted. It's just, yeah, not a good time for concealment. He's come to the wrong area to fight us. He should be fighting the rest of our allies. Like, if you told me play concealment operative, and this is what I had to face, I would have told you, no, I don't want to. No thanks. Who hurt you? I'm good. But one thing to think about, like a lot of people I know say like MM is really bad, and the main reason why it is because it doesn't really have any ways to instantly get abilities off. So if it had roll ambush baseline, not only would the class play a little bit more fluid, it would get benefit when it has to play defensively. When it has to play defensively, which is the biggest problem with it right now, it basically doesn't do damage like at all, unless it's, able to reposition and then attack back. But most of the time you need to either run or just constantly reposition to kite. If you want to do actual damage outside of penetrating rounds, suppressive fire, stuff like that, you need to have a way to get your ambush off. So you need to snipe into ambush. Sometimes you just ambush without it. I do that a lot in this situation just because I want the burst going into penetrating rounds. However, that's, you know, that's clearly not optimal. It'd be really nice if they would redesign the spec a little bit more, allow like snipe to maybe sometimes be used out of cover, or like when you're moving or something. Like a way to get instant snipes would be awesome. In that situation, I took a crap ton of damage. I was not expecting that, but thankfully I rolled the last bit of it, or I probably would have been dead there. A way to get like an instant snipe. So we do have a talent for that, but I think that should be probably baseline, so that would help with the repositioning thing to get your snipe off more often. And then having hightail it, basically the roll ambush tactical or whatever, make that baseline. Don't increase the damage, like remove the tactical as a whole or redesign it completely, but make it so that that tactical is either redesigned or more useful, or basically the current version gets baked into it. Like the spec as a whole as baseline. What I mean by that is like whenever you decide to use your roll, you get an instant ambush. Like a way to get an instant ambush would not only help it when it plays defensively, it'll also just make it more playable in PvP. Because it's currently one of the main reasons that MM, like in general, isn't able to hold its own. And it would also mean that MM players can actually take the tactical that has majority of their damage on it currently. Vital Shot is doing like 4 to 5k DPS of their total damage. And while I think that is terrible, like Spiteful Saber kind of levels of terrible, this spec really just doesn't have that many abilities in general. So I'm like not against it, but I do think like, I don't know, there's no good solution, right? Because if you remove agitating energies and increase overall base damage of everything, you run into the issue of just not being able to snipe ambush. You'll have uptime issues, and therefore the damage is not going to be good. And when you're playing under pressure, you're not going to have that damage. At least with Vital Shot, dot damage, you're able to, one, ticket, and regardless of whether they have white damage defenses or not, you're still taking it. And on top of that, you also have the benefit of not having to refresh your dots, so that's better energy management. 2, it's really easy to upkeep on multiple targets, and 3, you have the added benefit of one of your core abilities that actually does damage, pretty much be your top damage. In most situations, it's going to be your top damage unless you're hitting really, really, really hard or hitting a lot of AoE. And then also you would come into the situation like, okay, if you're raising the base damage for most abilities, you have Suppressive Fire. Again, MM snipers spam the living hell at the Suppressive Fire and penetrate rounds. So if you increase the damage on those abilities, the AoE Pin Blast and the AoE Suppressive Fire build is just going to be even more so common. It's just going to spam AoE, and that's kind of dumb because it does have an interesting kit for just bursting down players, but unfortunately, it can't really do that burst in the current state. It's still like fun to play, don't get me wrong. I really do like the reduced cooldown on the aim shot, which is ambush, but I also like the increased critical hit damage. I do think that, you know, maybe just make that baseline too. Forget about the cooldown reset on, was it target acquired or whatever? I can't remember what it's called. Hot streak, something like that. Basically the ability on X that makes it auto crit. Probably forget about that, but the extra 20% critical hit damage would definitely help. And it would help PvP like primarily because in PvP you're not always taking it, but obviously it would help PvE at the same time. I'm pretty sure in PvE they're not doing too amazing either, so they should really think about like just redesigning a lot of things on the spec. And it's not the only spec that's like this. Obviously, I think Annihilation needs this treatment too. Overall, doing damage on the spec, not hard. Playing the spec, not hard. And with its general lack of abilities compared to what it used to have before, it's pretty straightforward. Unfortunately, against like things like AP and Rage, it's quite literally a sitting duck. I don't know what to tell you guys when it comes to those. Thankfully, there's no Rage or AP in this match. Otherwise, this would have been a lot more miserable. Anyway, we're coming near the end here. There was something else I wanted to say. I can't quite remember. I think the last video I was talking about how the healing tank and DPS Trinity was kind of out of whack, and to further, I guess, talk about that, we run into the issue of, again, heals basically kind of been ignored for 2 expansions. Obviously there are some things that they did get, so don't think of it as like I think they never got any changes, because they did. It's just that for the most part they have not become a net positive. Like they're not able to answer 1 DPS's like full damage potential. So when you think of like a HP, or not HP, a healer like single targeting, like healing wise, they're not gonna keep up with some of the meta specs that are single targeting. That's just not a thing. Not anymore. They used to be able to do more, like quite a bit more in previous expansions, and now that's not necessarily the case. While they are doing a lot of AoE healing and healing multiple people, sometimes at the same time, depending on the spec, it doesn't quite make up for the amount of damage potential that's available. So for example, coming into 6.0, we got slam spam. We also got explosive weaponry. Now pyro has CC immunity on shield, so you can even stop them when they pop explosive fuel. There's just like in general a lot more AoE potential that just didn't exist before. We got AoE Raging Burst on Marauder and Sentinel. What else do we have that we didn't have before? It's really obnoxious. We had viral elements in 6.0. That was crazy. It's not really anything crazy on Lethality now, but I mean viral elements is still really strong. Elemental Infection still there. That's the last expansion though. Like a lot of these things that happened in 6.0 are just like showing their head now, because force bound's gone and a lot of our defensives are gone, so you really start seeing the difference. And with defenses being less, you know, less common, or not really common, but less powerful, or there's just less of them in general, you have to rely on tanks more, because tanks pretty much have all their defensive still. And on top of that, I do kind of agree with that, because obviously they're using their defensives for the team and protecting their team, but healers just can't answer the damage. So for example, if you have an arena game, obviously it comes down to better defensive usage, and then obviously healer and healer control, and the tank mitigating a lot of damage. Well, on top of that, you have tanks doing a lot of damage. It's just a lot for a tank to do at the moment. So you have high taunt uptime, so you have the ability to mitigate a lot of damage through a lot of different means, like Aegis, the sword. You also have, what's the other one called? There's like another one that like reduces the cooldown on your taunts or something. That one's actually kind of crazy. There's just a lot of things, a lot of options that we didn't have before that allow them to suck up a lot more damage, and healing hasn't got the answers for the damage, and tanking doesn't really either. Anyway, that was it. Yeah, not much to expect. This was interesting, of course, but I figured I would just talk about MM for a little bit, because I know some people have been wanting some MM footage, and here you guys go.